Okay, so this one is very hard, but very necessary because of the way the mainstream media and political class have conspired to, I think, virtually end all discussion about the assassination of Ann Widdecombe that was most likely a politically motivated terror attack. Today, we finally learned in court that 13 days ago, as my friend and colleague moved out of her beloved office, lined with all of her Hansard documents, having finished that now famous interview with Christian Radio, to sit down and eat her lunch, a man who prosecutors and police believe was Joshua Kerry pulled up into her driveway. They revealed in court they believe that he almost immediately went through the front door and within 2 minutes had hit her on the top of her head 21 times with a hammer. Before he left the property, he tipped her out of her chair and he took the wallet from her handbag. The conjecture would be, was that so that it looked like a burglary gone wrong? And he immediately drove away and drove the length of the country back to his house. There is very little doubt about these details, because we also learned today this chilling alleged murder was captured on a video camera that Anne had installed within her home, no doubt for security reasons. So it's a difficult one, this. We have to obviously understand that there are a huge amount of contempt of court laws in this country. So let me just take you through the Reuters report from court. And they report that the bearded 28-year-old who appeared in the dock at London's Westminster Magistrates Court wearing a grey tracksuit was not asked to enter a plea. But at a later hearing at the Old Bailey Court, he was remanded in custody until his next appearance in October. The prosecutor, Kashif Malik, had come armed with all of these new details, and he was the one who confirmed that it was a camera inside the house that captured the attack. Widdecombe, of course, had been due to be interviewed. This is from the Reuters report, live on television on July the 8th from her home, but did not appear, Malik explained. The following day, her personal assistant asked her gardener to check on Widdecombe, and it was the gardener who found her on the kitchen floor. Malik told the court that the recovered footage showed Kerry, this is Joshua Kerry, entering Widdecombe's home while she was eating lunch and asking her, "Don't suppose you have bank cards and ID?" Kerry, who was wearing black gloves and holding a hammer to his side so it was hidden from Widdecombe's view, then struck her 21 times, Malik said. He added that Kerry had tipped Widdecombe out of her chair onto the floor before taking her wallet and leaving, having been in the property for approximately 2 minutes. Then we come to the discovery of Anne's body. And you'll remember she had been due to appear on a Channel 5 show produced by Jeremy Vine's team. And they tried to contact Ms. Widdecombe through her personal assistant, who then asked the family gardener to check on her. Prosecutors said he found the politician lying face down on her kitchen floor with a serious head injury the next day. A provisional cause of death was given to the court as a blunt force injury to the head. Now, there's two reactions to this horror, isn't there? Obviously, it's unthinkable to contemplate the nature of the death, knowing the terror that Anne would have been in that moment. I mean, I always thought, knowing Anne, oh my gosh, she would have tried to reason with this man, and clearly there was no reasoning with him. It was all done so quickly. But we don't know the pain that Anne may have suffered in those final moments, and if indeed she was dead when he left the property. As Piers Morgan put it in just 4 words, alongside a prayer emoji, my God, poor Anne. But there is also the growing sense of a sophisticated establishment cover-up here. Why has it taken so long to know these details? How the hell did the police arrest the wrong man 2 days later, a delivery driver, when We now know there was footage of the attack. Why has Kerry still not been charged with terrorism, given I first revealed he was a hard leftist with communist material in his home? And The Sun has also reported he appeared to have some sort of anti-Farage shrine. Former GB News star Stephen Edgington pointed out we are slowly getting the brutal details of how Ann Widdecombe was murdered. The police must tell us about the political motivations of the alleged killer. If Diane Abbott had been killed by a far-right racist, you are sure we would know all the facts immediately. See Joe Cox. And we did. Richard Tice's worried fiancée, Isabel Oakeshott, right? It must have been completely obvious to police immediately that Ann Widdecombe had been brutally murdered. The misinformation that followed over several days is inexplicable. Lawrence Fox added, horrific. Why is this assassination being ignored? Once again, if this was someone who held differing opinions and morals, we would never hear the end of it. A grandmother of politics massacred. And all the media talks about is Andy's new cabinet. Shameful disrespect. And pointing to Reform UK's slumping poll ratings, he added, I remember a Britain when we rallied around the party who had one of their members brutally slain, rather than rallying around a party who gives softball interviews to jug airs. Deeply unserious panto government working exactly as they predicted it would. Bravo, comrades. And then today, Nigel Farage himself has weighed in, posting on X, the details of Ann Widdecombe's murder revealed in court are horrific. Why will no one report on Joshua Kerry's political views? Now, this is a very interesting one, and I know that it is something that the people at the top of Reform UK, having spoken to them myself, feel deeply frustrated about. But I will reveal to them the answer because it was provided, ironically, by the leftist ex-account Larry the Cat, who lectured Farage because it's important that perpetrators of horrific crimes are convicted and punished. For that to happen, there needs to be a fair trial to establish guilt. It is grossly irresponsible for someone in your position to suggest others should jeopardize that. So what they want is silence. What they are demanding is silence. And increasingly, our authorities do hide, I believe, behind contempt of court to shut down debate, to shut down reporting. Reform's Matt Goodwin wasn't shutting up, though, posting, I suspect the cause is left-wing extremism, but let's see. So what can we say? Well, having revealed that both the Prime Minister and the police chief wrongly tried to insist to Nigel Farage all weekend long after Ann's murder that this was just a burglary gone wrong, he never accepted that. Writing in a column for The Sun, I have it on good authority that the murder suspect was a hard left activist. He attended various marches and hated anyone with an opposing view. He had expressed his hatred of me on more than one occasion. He was an intolerant individual obsessed with Soviet communism. He may also have been known to the authorities. And he told the Independent Trigonometry podcast why he was convinced the police had got it wrong from the start. New explosive takes on the culture war and politics every single day. Yes, the ones the establishment don't want you to see. Subscribe to Outspoken right now so you never miss what's really going on.
Do you know something that we don't about that murder?
Yeah. If you demonize people because, I don't know, in Anne's case, they don't believe in gay marriage, or they have strict views on abortion, or they believe in immigration, strict immigration controls. If you absolutely dehumanize people like this, is it surprising that living out there in the subculture of those who spend their lives online and struggle to get on with other people, that this doesn't engender a form of hate? And, I mean, clearly Anne's murder is, a very, very deeply upsetting thing. And I've noticed, just interesting going around the doors here in Clacton, people are really, really hit by it. Just good ordinary folk are really hit by this. I can't think of anybody more famous that's been murdered for decades and decades. So there is a direct link between the two. That there's no question. And it was so interesting to see the police, Devon and Cornwall police, or should we just call them what they are, plod, absolute waste of space. I think they're still looking for somebody that could have committed a burglary, They were so wrong about everything. Obvious to me, right from the first minute, this was politically motivated, premeditated assassination of a political figure. And I would argue, back to your question, directly downstream of the kind of campaign that is being waged against the entire reform agenda by many online, in mainstream media, and in the House of Commons every single week.
Nigel also believes there is a huge amount of political hypocrisy going on here. He says if the murder suspect were a Reform Party member, there would be cause for the party to be shut down.
I mean, can you imagine if the murderer was a Reform Party member? Well, I mean, we'd be closed down. We wouldn't even exist. And it's why when people say to me, and commentators write, oh, well, Nigel Farage, he's obviously losing his mind because he's getting angry with journalists. Yeah, I am. I'm getting really angry with journalists, particularly Times journalists who choose to publish photographs of where my daughter lives. You know, she's not a public figure. There is no public interest in this at all. And I see what happened to Anne 5 days after that programme, and I begin to get very scared about things.
And he added that left-wing terrorism is now something we need to get used to, given the way mainstream leftist commentators now act.
Yeah, we're not used to the concept in recent times at all of left-wing terrorism, but it's pretty clearly what it is. But, you know, Adam Bolton, Peter Tatchell, other well-known figures in the wake of Anne's murder, just saying the most beastly things about her. I mean, the old rule is if you can't say nice things about the dead, say nothing, which I think generally is actually quite a good rule. And yet, they so believe in their own righteous virtue that they feel allowed to do these things. And I do not know of a single significant conservative commentator, small c conservative commentator, who would ever say anything approaching that on the death of a senior left-wing public figure. You know, if Jeremy Corbyn died, I'd say, well, they didn't agree with him, but you know what? The man believed in what he believed in and fought for it for decades. So there is a very big difference here between how the right think and speak about the left and how the left, including public figures, now think and speak about the right.
And the Sun's reporting suggests that what Nigel Farage has said is indeed correct. Sources said police discovered a mass of articles at Joshua Kerry's address during his arrest. One source said the articles on the walls were all about Reform UK leader Nigel Farage's party and their immigration policies. Other discoveries saw counter-terrorism officers take overall charge of the police investigation. It would appear he had a profound dislike of the party, its leaders, and its policies. To discuss today's breaking news further, Dr. David Starkey and Lois Perry. Okay, so Dr. Starkey, there's obviously the devastating human tragedy today, and a lot of us have feared the state Anne was in when she was discovered, but to hear confirmation of the 21 hammer blows to the head is obviously incredibly difficult. But what is also very difficult, David, is that covering this case in the United Kingdom now feels scary. I do know more about the alleged political leanings of this man. Nigel Farage wants people like me to report it, but you would acknowledge it is very difficult to do that, given the way the government seems to use contempt of court laws to crack down on information being freely available after these types of cases.
Yes, I mean, again, there's an awful smell, isn't there, of two-tier. That if we go back, for example, right to the beginning of the late premiership of Keir Starmer, the Southport riots, he didn't hesitate for 1 second to say, these are wicked right-wing demonstrations, we will come down with the full weight of the law. In other words, he actually condemned people before they were even in court. He said, effectively an instruction to the police and the magistrates to use the policies which he devised organised back in 2011 at the time of those riots against the offenders. Really, I suppose what somebody should have done, but of course now long too late, would have been effectively to have prosecuted him under our contempt of court laws. He seemed to me to trespass. And there is, again, you haven't mentioned it, and I think it is worth thinking about. The charge of terrorism, brought in as it was, has allowed the detention of the suspect for how many days is it now? 8, 9 days?
Yes, and it can be up to 14.
There are special rules which permit detaining without charge. Because the charge hearing has just taken place now. Now, what was going on during that period? It was called the World Cup. There were gatherings of people in pubs. There were people out very late because matches were very late. And I would imagine, and do you know what? Maybe I am speculating. Maybe I'm speculating illegitimately. I think the delay that you've been talking about is, again, how do we avoid public disorder during this period? Yeah? It is perfectly clear.
Absolutely. I think it's absolutely a consideration. It's a drip, 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 isn't it? And the first weekend, David, it was also incredibly sunny. You know, it was a weekend. Exactly. Look at what happened with Southport.
But I think the real difference is it wasn't drip, drip, drip. We had false information to begin with, and then a long period of silence. But of course, it is also terribly convenient, isn't it, that the man is charged on the day the new prime minister is. In other words, the court hearing goes. You were saying now, who was it? Was it Nigel had said, wasn't it disgraceful that we are focusing on the appointment of a new cabinet when this dreadful case comes to court? Well, of course we are, because without wanting to sound heartless, it is actually more important. But did we all know that the 20th was going to be the day that the new prime minister came in? I was able to plan a party a month ago on the assumption that it was on the 20th. I'm ashamed to say you were saying the right wing doesn't celebrate deaths. I was celebrating the political death of Keir Starmer. We did a terrific party last night.
And we deserve that. We deserve that. And Anne would fully sign up to that. But first, a quick word about Bubs Naturals and a supplement that is receiving a great deal of attention because of something I am obsessed with to support both physical performance and mental sharpness: creatine monohydrate. As you get older, maintaining strength, recovering properly, and keeping your energy levels up can require a bit more effort than it did in your 20s. Trust me, as someone in my 40s trying to stay fit, still focused on losing weight, I know the body may not bounce back quite as quickly, and it becomes increasingly clear that staying healthy is also about recovering intelligently, supporting your muscles, and properly fueling your body. Now, that is where Bubs Naturals Creatine Monohydrate comes in. Creatine, sometimes treated as though it's only for bodybuilders. That's not true. Look at me. What it does, though, is help your body produce a quick energy during exercise and other high-intensity activities. So that means it can help support strength, power, lean muscle growth, and recovery. But its benefits not limited to the gym. Creatine also helps fuel the brain and can support focus, mental clarity, and cognitive performance. And it could not be easier to take, by the way. You simply mix 1 scoop into water, coffee, or a smoothie, whatever you were drinking, actually. There's no complicated routine. And importantly, Bubs does creatine properly. Its creatine monohydrate is made using CreaPure, which is widely regarded as the gold standard. No fillers, dyes, artificial additives, sweeteners, or unnecessary ingredients. Bubs Naturals, by the way, is really something you should know about. It also makes collagen peptides to support joints, skin, hair, nails, and recovery. Hydrate or dye electrolytes to support hydration and sustain energy. And MCT oil creamers to support energy and mental clarity. So, live better for longer. We want that, right? With Bubs Natural. And this is so exciting. For a limited time, Outspoken viewers and listeners can get 20% off their entire order. So just head to bubsnaturals.com and use the code Outspoken at checkout. So that is bubsnatural.com. the code outspoken for 20% off your entire order. I've put a link in the description too. Oh, and by the way, after your purchase, they will ask where you heard about them. Please support the show and tell them that Outspoken sent you. But now, back to the show.
So, but the wretched man is still alive. But there is a terrible sense, isn't there, of what we know about the nudge unit, what we know about comms, and this is something we should be talking about a lot later. This Labour government believes supremely in comms. In other words, it believes bluntly about the manipulation of public opinion. And this goes right back to Alistair Campbell. I mean, we saw their trigonometry with Nigel appearing before that very formidable pair of inquisitors. One of the previous people to sit in that seat very recently was Alistair Campbell, who was taken apart. But Campbell, Campbell is the man, and can we just call it frankly, a culture of lying. About propaganda. It's lying. It's a branch of the art of lying, and it's now deployed utterly shamelessly.
But David, you are effectively agreeing, though, that this is part of a sophisticated cover-up.
No, it's not. No, it's not yet. It's not a cover-up. In other words, the man will be tried. The evidence is now public. And what I'm talking about, the timing of it, isn't cover-up. It's management. In other words, we mustn't have this during the World Cup. We don't want to give too much prominence to it, so it comes out on the day that the old Prime Minister resigns, a new one is appointed. There's all the nonsense and pageantry of Buckingham Palace, and what is now the even sillier pageantry of the Prime Minister nattering outside, the new Prime Minister nattering outside Downing Street, old pageantry and new pageantry. So it's deliberate containment of public opinion and the shaping of public opinion. That's how it's done. I mean, when we shift to talking about the incoming government, Lois, putting words in my mouth for the nomination of Andy Burnham, talked about this as a full-blown communist coup. It's not. It's one Labour faction replacing another Labour faction.
Yes, and we will get to that because I know you disagree. You disagree with Farage on that.
Just 1 second. Who will use the manipulation of public opinion to conceal the fact they have no new policies at all.
No, indeed. And we are going to get to that because, of course, it is incredibly important. But Lois, can we just talk about the human side of this? Okay, because, I mean, I know you were close with Anne too. She attended the launch of your Heartland Institute as one of the star guests, and I mean, it was such a great night. I remember looking after Anne that night, and she was a bit like the Queen, you know. We were bringing her champagne and bringing people to her, but she was such a vibrant figure. Lois, so this must hit you on a personal level there, but also the fact that you are incredibly close to lots of senior people within Reform UK, including Nigel Farage, who now feel like their lives are on the line. You personally have been targeted, I believe, by Hope Not Hate, this organisation that had the cheek to target Ann Widdecombe when she was alive, and then the moment she's assassinated, deleted the web page designed to turn all the leftists against her. So from a human level, Lois, how do you feel about this news today?
Well, first of all, I would just like to say that on a human level, I'm just going to do a nice positive story about Anne first. She totally and utterly won over my nan and my mum at that event. They'd heard all sorts of stories, you know, in the 90s about the various things when she was Home Secretary and had a view, let's put it like that. But Anne completely not just won them round. She didn't need to win them round, but they put it this way: they just went away from the event saying, what a great woman, what a wonderful lady. And she was very generous with her time with my son too. So that was lovely. On a personal level, for me personally, yes, I'm a peripheral figure, but I'm also have an association with Reform. And also I do work with Israel through my work, the Reform Friends of Israel. And so I've been fortunate enough to have security put into my flat. but I had a call from the security company saying that they wanted to come round and basically turn up the volume on in terms of the level of security at the flat. So yeah, but what I will say, I totally agree with David as per usual. And I handed you one of my nominees. That's why about Andy Burnham. But we'll discuss that over dinner later when we go out. But you know, basically, it's yeah, it's just an absolute nightmare. The whole thing.
Can I ask you about something else, David Starkey? And this is about trust now, because I believe the trust in police and authorities is collapsing, and that is when you have potential societal decline, potential civil war coming. I'm just going to give you one example, right? So many people today, David, saying something doesn't add up about this particular suspect. So look at this. This is a mainstream politician, Darren Grimes of Reform UK, friend of mine. He is an elected Reform UK politician, openly questioning the fact. And David, I have had people all over the country, from viewers of the show to very senior political figures, saying this doesn't add up. The picture of Joshua Kerry that was released looks nothing like the CCTV image that we were shown by The Sun, and it now looks nothing like the court sketch today. Now, these people, David, are usually dismissed as conspiracy theorists, right? But do you understand that this sort of containment that you're talking about, the silence, the delaying of information, means that there are now a lot of people not even trusting the official version of this event whatsoever? They don't believe this is the guy. They think it's a cover-up already. Now, I don't have enough information to make a call either way, but do you understand that there is now such a lack of trust in authorities and in the police?
Yes, of course I do. Remember, I was one of the first to point out that the idea of two-tier is not simply an accident. It's not simply some silly policeman are more likely, and Lois will forgive me, some silly police woman, because the silliest things of all seem to be carried out by these terrible, fat, waddling policewomen who, of course, couldn't actually arrest a real criminal to save their lives. It's all founded in law, unfortunately. We do have a two-tier structure of law. We also have what I talked about at length, maybe too much length just now, which is we have the deliberate manipulation of information. Now, is it done for a wicked purpose? I don't actually really think it is. It is a problem with a multiracial society, as David Betts, a very distinguished professor of war studies.
And he thinks we're already in civil war.
He thinks there are no, he doesn't. He says the preconditions are there and that we may be edging closer and closer. And what's going on is clearly an attempt at dampening down. But the problem is when you filter information and when you do it in a very, very one-sided way, then of course people suspect not simply the fact that they're being manipulated, they suspect the truth of everything they're being told. And there's another even bigger issue, Dan. We have a society like the old Soviet Union that is founded on big lies, that diversity is our strength, that multiculturalism is a wonderfully good thing, that anti-Semitism only comes from the right, has got absolutely nothing to do.
Freedom is slavery.
We have, curiously enough, quite a lot of Muslims in the country. This sort of thing. There are deliberate big lies which are sold to. COVID was, of course, a monstrous example of this. And once all these things accumulate, once you get the Henry Nowak affair, everything piles up. Each thing goes on another, and the trust. And remember, a decent society. A society which, as we used to have for ever since the 19th century, with an unarmed police force, uniquely an unarmed police force, or I think maybe in a couple of other countries in the world, and that depends on trust. It depends on the fact that we trust each other and that we broadly trust the state. But once the state has to start telling big lies, Plato, unfortunately, so much of this has got the highest backing, at the highest level. Plato talks about a society depending on the noble lie. Well, that's exactly what we see, that in the name of protecting diversity, in the name of stopping cultural tension, clash between these famous communities, we've got to manipulate public opinion. But people see through it. And again, both of you, we're all on roughly the same side politically. And the problem is that we are dealing with a world in which once you normalize the lie, you're lost. We can't conduct ordinary politics. You can't conduct ordinary conversation.
Can I just interject just very briefly, just with regards to Sir David Amos's murder, talking about things not being quite what they seem. Now, Katie Amos, his daughter, has fought very hard for an inquiry, and so far all of her efforts, all of her hard work has been to no avail. But there's something very interesting about the Sir David Amos murder, and I don't doubt for one second that the person that was convicted of the crime did it. But there were so many unanswered questions. My ex-husband was the last meeting that Sir David Amos ever had. He was developing with Sir David the Sir David Amos Children's Parliament, which is actually a really successful venture, and Kemi Badenoch is about to become the patron of it, actually. But he was the last meeting. It was a Zoom meeting that Sir David ever had. He was murdered, I think, within minutes after the call. He sat down, the guy, and texted someone saying, "It is done." My ex-husband was never interviewed, ever. Even though, and the footage was never asked for of the Zoom meeting, even though it was only 2 or 3 minutes before the murder of Sir David. There was no, who did he text? Who did he text and say it was done? Because there was only one conviction. And the other point I just very briefly wanted to make was when Joe Cox was murdered, they wasted no time whatsoever in telling us that the guy was far right, that he was this, he was that, so this whole thing about, we need to make sure that everything is done correctly for the court case. Whilst I do respect that enormously, because in spite of everything, I still have the most extraordinary respect for the institutions in this country. It is a bit strange, isn't it?
Well, it is. And of course, we have to remember the fact too, and we're going to need answers on some of this. Was it really a coincidence that Ann Widdecombe was one of Sir David Amos's closest friends?
They were both lifetime patrons, Dan, of the right. They were the only 2 lifetime patrons of the Right to Life organisation.
Yes.
Yeah,
and Anne had obviously supported Katie Amos during all of this, and then they were at the unveiling of the statue. So there is so much more that we need to know. Dan Wotton Outspoken is your no spin, no bias, no censorship outlet for independent news. We have no big tech backing or billionaires pulling my strings, but that does mean I need your support. So please hit subscribe on YouTube, turn on the notification bell, and subscribe to Dan Wotton Outspoken on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It's totally free, but allows me to continue my promise to always keep fighting for